Okay, Rowdy, good morning and welcome to December 20th, 2023's meeting of the Livable Roadways Committee. It is time for pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. Hey, roll call.
Councilmember Hurtak.
Here.
Cal Hardy. I have him virtual. Yanika Mills. Samantha Flores.
Here.
Kevin O'Hare.
Here.
David Hay.
Here.
Emily Hinsdale.
Here.
Chris Thompson.
Oh,
Danielle Riffenberg.
Here.
Thank you. Larry Josephson. Anna Grundman. Karen Kress.
Here.
Rebecca Hessinger.
Here.
Omar Alvarado. Bobby Edwards. Jesus Peraza Garcia.
Here.
Thank you. Jason Jackman.
Here virtually.
Ana Quinones. Robert Fry. Brian Ramirez. Nicole Dufa.
Here.
Thank you. Glorimar Belangia. Yeah, I'm sorry, yes.
This is Cal Hardy. I was here. I just didn't, I'm here virtually. So
I got you, thank you. Glorimar Belangia. I believe I also have her virtual. Yes. Carlos Ramirez. Una Johnson.
I'm here virtually.
Thank you. Catherine Coyle.
Here.
Melissa Colazzo. Arizona Jenkins. Gus Ignas. Bryn Dauphiné.
Here.
I believe we have an in-person quorum.
Go ahead. Gail, I just
Yes.
wanted to, I'm President Yanika Mills.
Thank you.
She walked in after you called her name.
So Unica came in, and who else?
Just her.
Okay. Yes, we do have an in-person quorum.
Okay. Okay, do we have some public comment today?
And virtually. And I didn't see anyone in the audience.
Okay, about approval of the minutes from the November 15th, 2023 meeting.
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Catherine and a second by Bryn. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Courtney Campbell Causeway Vulnerability Assessment and Resiliency Overview.
Good to get going? All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Mike Salisbury. I'm a coastal engineer with Atkins here on behalf of DOT to give a presentation on the study we're doing. This is actually a two-part presentation, so I'll go first and then Tara will present, give a second presentation after me. So what we're currently doing now in support of DOT is evaluating the existing conditions out there at Courtney Campbell Causeway and trying to understand how vulnerable it may or may not be to certain storm events that come through. Storm events meaning hurricane type of storms, or it could be like a storm that just went through a couple of days ago. You know, some major coastal storm event that kicks up the waves and the tides to levels that could possibly do damage to the causeway and bridges. So part of my presentation, I'll show a little bit on the motivation, kind of go through some of the existing conditions that are out there, get into the storm surge and wave hazards that the causeway can expect, and wrap up with some conceptual alternatives that we're currently considering, and kind of move into a path forward. So first, a little bit on the motivation. So for those of you that you're probably mostly familiar with Hurricane Ian that occurred last year, and it famously impacted the Sanibel Causeway. So what you have here is the picture on the left is the Sanibel Causeway before Hurricane Ian, and the picture on the right is shortly after Hurricane Ian. And you can see that the causeway was completely cut through, the bridges and causeways completely torn apart. And in that case, that was the only access route for the folks living out on Sanibel Island. So that, as you can imagine, that caused a significant amount of angst and problems for local residents. A little bit more closer to home here with Courtney Campbell. These are pictures. They're taken just about a month and a half ago at Venti Davis Beach. You can see along the shoreline there's some existing erosion that is just getting worse and worse with each storm event. So this damage was taken after, photos was taken after Hurricane Idalia went through this year, but my understanding is the storm that just went through a couple days ago also created some additional damage, so it might even look a little bit worse out there today in this area. So, if you're, you can kind of see the picture on the right there that erosion is up against the shared use path, and just a little bit further, you're talking about impacting the actual roadway. So it's getting to be pretty critical out there. So that leads us into trying to understand how vulnerable the causeway is. So in order to do that, we did a few different things. One is we did a field reconnaissance, so went out there to the site. We did, in this case, we took a drone with us, and we did a lot of drone imagery and mapping, took over 3,500 aerial images. We visited some critical areas. We had to understand for like the revetments that are out there, how they're built, how robust, and when we talk about revetment, how robust has a lot to do with how big of rocks are. You can think of like these big waves from storm events. Those waves can pick up things and move things pretty easily. So you have to build rocks that are big enough, heavy enough that the waves won't pick them up and move them away when they start crashing into the shoreline. So we need to understand what that was existing out there. Once we got a handle on existing conditions, we needed to get our arms wrapped around what are the potential extreme storm event conditions that can impact. So, what are anticipated storm surge levels, what are anticipated waves that will be crashing into the shoreline. And there's a few different data sources that we can use. The ones, ultimately the source that we've found to be most comprehensive that we can lean on for our current effort is the Army Corps, U.S. Army Corps South Atlantic Coastal Study. Now, that's South Atlantic. It's a little bit of a misnomer since it also stretches to the Florida Gulf Coast as well, so it covers all the Tampa Bay area. And it's a state-of-the-art modeling study they did, looking at thousands of potential storm events that can impact the area. And it was just released to the public in October 2022, so just a year old. So it's good state-of-the-art data that we can lean on. And so we took that data and we wanted to understand, as it applies to the causeway, what does that look like in terms of what could impact the bridges? So to use this figure on the screen here is a little bit of a kind of setting the stage, so to speak. I want you to envision that you're maybe out in the middle of the Old Tampa Bay in a boat, and you're on the south side of the causeway, and you're looking north. So you can kind of see the Pinellas side, Courtney Campbell Beach side is on the left, and Venti Davis is all the way to the right. So just kind of imagine you're in a boat looking horizontally towards the north, just kind of orienting you a little bit here. Because what you see here, this is now that profile of the bridge from west to east between the two beaches. The black line is the edge of the roadway elevations as you go along the causeway. Colors don't completely show up too well on the screen, but the kind of orange color is in this case, it's the 20-year storm surge elevation. So 20-year, when you hear someone say 20-year, 100-year, et cetera, A 20-year storm surge has about a 5% chance of occurring in any given year. 100-year would have a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. So the storm surge, you see this, the 20-year storm surge level is right at the edge of the road, edge of the pavement, and a lot of locations. And when you factor in the waves on top of that, the wave crest elevation completely overtops the road. So the causeway becomes very vulnerable in just the 20-year conditions. So anything above and beyond that would just be more problematic. So that's current existing conditions. We're also looking at sea level rise, understanding what possible future conditions we are. There's the resilient flood and vulnerability criteria that we're looking at a few different years. And if we look at just like say the lower sea level rise scenario that I have on the screen here, year 2040, the sea level rise is expected to be about 0.7 feet higher, all the way up to year 2100. You're talking about 2 feet higher just for your normal mean high tide line, so to speak. So, if you were to, look at the causeway now, but also into the future. In the future, it's with sea level rise, it's more vulnerable than it is now. So right now, I said it's the 20-year storm, but year 2100, it's the 5-year storm that would cause problems for the road. So 5-year has it's just going to be pretty much, there's a good chance that on an annual basis, when you get to year 2100, the causeway is going to be having problems with erosion, damage, et cetera, that can be quite significant. So once we understood how vulnerable the bridge is now and into the future, we're looking at phase we're in now is starting to look at what are possible resiliency solutions. And the stage we're at now is we're really evaluating anything and everything that can be used out there along the causeway. Anything from completely green solutions such as vegetative plantings, mangroves, marsh fills, et cetera, all the way up to completely gray solutions such as stone revetment or seawalls. And it really could be anything in between, combinations of green and gray infrastructure. So just to give you a little bit of example as to what that looks like. Vegetative, just pictures of vegetative plantings on the left, marsh hills in the middle, and then kind of bank grading vegetative plantings on the right. And just kind of continuing on through various breakwater wave attenuation devices, just some examples of what they could possibly look like. And getting into a little bit more of the gray scenarios with revetments and seawalls, which most people are pretty typical, pretty familiar with. And so when we give you a sense of what we look at when we evaluate each of these options, it's how robust are they at holding up to these extreme water levels and waves that are impacting the shoreline, looking at how easy it is for permitting, or how beneficial it is to the environment, looking at what are the local conditions such as your bathymetry, your soil. So it's kind of a whole matrix that we look at, trying to evaluate pros and cons, and we'll eventually in the end identify what we think is ideal solution for the causeway. And more than likely, based on what we see, it's probably going to be a combination of solutions. So it'll probably be in one area, it's one solution. One solution makes the most sense. You move down the causeway. The causeway is about 9 miles long, give or take. So move to a different location than causeway, just given kind of local conditions, maybe a different solution makes sense in different locations. So we'll probably end up being a hybrid of scenarios that go in. And once we understand what each of those solutions are, then the plan is to present to FDOT leadership for consideration and discussion on movement forward. So that's it for me. Before I turn it over to Tara to discuss some of the these broader Tampa Bay bridges, any questions for me before I hand it off to Tara?
Thank you.
Sure.
Good morning. My name is Tara Rodriguez. I'm from the Bridge Structures Maintenance Office at FDOT. So tagging on to what we're talking about with resiliency for our Courtney Courtney Campbell bridges and some of our other bridges. We've been actively looking at that and ways the FDOT can make our bridges stronger and more resilient. So I'll tell you what we're already working on so far. So I'm going to be discussing the bridges in general because that's my territory. So bridges, we have to worry about scour, right? So if you just think of an umbrella stand at the beach, eventually if you start digging away the sand around it, that umbrella becomes a little unstable. Same thing with bridges, same principle. So we're looking at to making sure that the soils, the channel bonds, the mudline, and everything's stable and our bridges are secure. This is an example of the Courtney Campbell Bridge. This is the main bridge on Courtney Campbell. This is from a tropical storm back in 2020, and this showed us how vulnerable our bridges are. It's not so much the piles and the substructures, but it's the slopes of the bridges that are becoming vulnerable. In this area, and a typical high tide, we see water all the way up to the bottom of the slope. Once we get a storm surge, a king tide, the water is moving and it's progressively further. So this was an old design that we have for slope protection. It was basically you have your dirt, your soil, then you have some concrete riprap bags and then a concrete slurry on top. But once you lose one bag, once you have a hole, it's an hourglass where it just kind of comes out. So luckily it wasn't a major catastrophic damage, but this tropical storm said, all right, we need to start making actions now. Here's another example. And you can see that we're already seeing some of the actual structure that's supposed to be buried. And here is an emergency repair that we did through an H contract shortly after to go ahead and strengthen the slope. This is a semi-permanent repair that now we are working on going back and doing a full extensive repair. Our construction project actually just let a week ago for the permanent repairs. Also from Tropical Storm Eta, this is 2020, you have very large riprap and bedding stone, and the water forces literally can just pick up these stones. The past storm that we just had, 90-pound boulders were just picked up and moved the shore. So we definitely realized that we need to strengthen our bridge structures. So the project that just was let, and the goal is for construction to be completed before the peak of hurricane season this coming year. So what we're doing, we're basically, I know it's a lot of details, but we are strengthening our slopes down to putting a geotextile fabric. We're going to have larger stones, larger bedding stones, and we're going to have riprap bags on top of it. We are building all of the slopes around the Courtney Campbell Bridge. I can get into the details if we have any structural engineers in the room, but all in all, we are rebuilding and we are strengthening up to a point where we're starting to bury, we're installing rebar to make sure the concrete bags don't move. We are going above and beyond to make sure the Courtney Campbell Bridge is secure. As part of our study and our strengthening, the new Howard Franklin Bridge is also being constructed. So they reached out to us in the maintenance office, hearing that we're working with Atkins and some of our partners and looking at making our structures more resilient. From the Sanibel Causeway catastrophic event, if you will, we realized that the new Howard Franklin Bridge, we will need to fine tune some of our designs for the strengthening of the approaches of the Howard Franklin Bridge. And luckily, since we're still in construction, we were able to get in there and start updating our designs to make sure we don't have anything near what happened at Sanibel for the new Howard Franklin. So what are we doing at the Howard Franklin Bridge? Instead of just installing concrete slabs, we are starting to use standard and fiber reinforced. We're adding structural steel to our concrete. New larger riprap bags that we're actually getting imported from Georgia, or not riprap bags, rubble riprap and bedding stone, very, very large, very heavy stones that we're going to be putting in front of our seawalls, in front of our shores. Show you some details that we have. So underneath the Howard Franklin Bridge, just like Courtney Campbell, there is a pathway underneath, a turnaround point, also some fishermen use those areas as well. So we are going to be strengthening all those areas with additional steel, additional bedding stone, rubble riprap. We also found that anytime from Sanibel, anytime that you have a concrete member, a concrete barrier next to a wall, anytime you have a seam or an opening, that's an avenue for water to get in. Right, which makes sense. Anytime you have water able to get in between two joints, now any sand or silts that you have underneath are going to start consolidating, they're going to start getting washed out. So we are sealing all of our joints and making sure that there's no access for water to be able to get in around any of our walls or barriers around the new Howard Franklin Bridge. This is Hurricane Idalia 2023. Jumping back to the Courtney Campbell Bridge, you can see how high the water level is. Our typical fender system that's about 6-8 feet above the water was completely engulfed. And the planks that are sitting on top of the fender just popped off like keys on a keyboard. So that also showed us that we are vulnerable for fender systems as well, which are there to provide a visual guide for boaters and Marines, and also to protect our structure as well when boats are coming through. Over to the east of the Courtney Campbell Main Bridge, there is a smaller bridge that was designed and installed in 2019. It's a very low-level bridge that was cut through the roadway and installed to just provide additional water quality measures and increase the water quality in that area. Because it is a low-level bridge, the second we have a storm event, a high tide, the water level goes up and over the barriers, up and over the seawall. You may have noticed anytime we have a major hurricane storm event, Courtney Campbell is usually the first one that gets closed. And that is not due to a structural concern. It's because the water levels are so high. There's a lot of vegetation, there's a lot of waves. So we close the bridge just for safety. Go ahead and we already set up crews to come out there and start cleaning out, make sure it's safe before we open it to traffic. But Courtney Campbell is our most vulnerable bridge, our most vulnerable causeway, so that is why we're going after it now and making sure that we're strengthening it. You may see right now there's agency contractors out there. Middlesex is currently out there and they're working on rebuilding the slopes for the actual causeway elements, and they're also going to be doing emergency repairs for this smaller bridge. You can see from the photos, the waves went up and over the barrier. Luckily, it didn't reach the actual traveling roadway, but up and over the trail, the pedestrian trail. And because of that, we have had extensive damage. And also just this past weekend, the damage has increased even further to now where it has some erosion at that area. We've had some rotated walls. So they're actually going out within the next couple of days and they're going to be restoring this section, just to make sure no future storm events can jeopardize our bridges and the causeway. I know I went kind of fast, but if anyone has any questions, again, we're actively working on strengthening our bridges and structures. We're learning as we go, and as we learn from the hydraulic analysis and the scour studies and sea level rise, and what are we working with, and how can we proactively make our structures stronger for the Tampa Bay area.
I just have a comment. I don't know if anyone had an actual question or not, but I know the department's been a great steward of Courtney Campbell from a West Shore perspective. We've been very thankful. I know this is not the first time I've kind of had an update on the resiliency study, so there's been some great work done just in understanding what our vulnerabilities are. And I think the department's, again, just been a good steward with it. But just a general comment, I know we've had, at least internally, a lot of conversations, and also the Courtney Campbell Scenic Highway Committee has had a lot of conversations around just kind of the future of the Courtney Campbell, especially when it comes to resiliency after what happened with the Sanibel Causeway. And I think definitely from the Hillsborough side, there's a lot of work that can be done. I know we just had a presentation from the city of Tampa on their parking master plan. The West Shore side of the Courtney Campbell is a little bit like the Wild Wild West, especially on weekends. It can get very wild. And that does a lot to hurt the vegetation, which then in turn hurts the resiliency, which then in turn makes it more vulnerable to sea rise. More importantly, it is a man-made beach. So at some point, you have to understand that nature is going to take its course, and either you're going to shell out a lot of money to continue to refurbish it on an annual basis, or you're going to let nature take its course and let the sea kind of reclaim it. You can look at what happened on the beaches this past week with the winter storm we just had to see $50 million go back out to sea. So I think that there's, as much as the resiliency is great, and again, shows FDOT's commitment to really the gem that is the Courtney Campbell, because it is a very high traffic destination, especially on the pedestrian side. But I think there needs to be more work done, especially from the Hillsborough side. Parking master plan, there was a lot of conversation on parking management districts. We charge 50 cents an hour to park in Courtney Campbell, which is the lowest parking rate in the city of Tampa. In fact, the city loses money on it every year. If we just matched what the Clearwater side pays, which is $6 an hour flat rate, then we would have enough money to actually go and have potentially more officers out on the Courtney Campbell to help parking enforcement. We would have more ability to assist with just kind of the general upkeep that goes towards resiliency. It's not just what the department is doing for structural resiliency, but also our cultural resiliency and how we're protecting the Courtney Campbell. So again, the department's doing their side. I do think that there's more to be done on the culture side. And of course, the Alliance is ready and able to help with that. So thank you again, of course, to your work, and looking forward to seeing this project wrap up and continue the success of the trail. So thank you.
Thank you. Danielle?
So I'm with City Parks and Rec, and we actually had this is just for information, we actually had a meeting yesterday with a group, I think it was Applied Sciences. We have a grant with them to look at resiliency for that area, and Benji Davis definitely came up. It is definitely an interesting cultural asset. We do a lot of cleanup on Mondays on the Parks and Rec side, so it is, I will say, it's on the city's radar. And I know they mentioned that y'all were working on a resiliency study as well, so.
Yeah, we actually have 2 resiliency studies going on simultaneously, just to, they're both looking at different things. One's looking at the Army Corps and sea level rise, and then we have another one that's looking at the hydraulic models and what do we see, what are the implications for scour, so we have all hands on deck, if you will.
Well, it's almost as a victim of our own success in many ways. It's not necessarily a lack of prioritization. It's just an overwhelming problem. So it takes an all hands on approach. So that's great that City Parks is looking at it. And yeah, of course it comes up. I know that Monday morning trash usually it's a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
Well, we actually had a commenter, public comment last Thursday that was talking about the noise on the Clearwater side. Someone drove over from Clearwater complained because they said that no one will help them because it's a no man's land. So the police won't help and this won't help. So what they can do. So that was very interesting. So you said that currently we only charge 50 cents an hour.
Yeah.
Park there and take it over.
Yeah, the Clearwater side definitely charges more, but you'll notice that especially with the fishermen and the other recreational uses, it's a lot tidier on the Clearwater side.
Yeah.
Now, keep in mind, we have Whiskey Joe's, we have a
They
lot
don't
of,
have the restaurants.
yeah, they don't have restaurants, so that does
And
make
the
a difference.
hotels.
Yeah, that does make a difference, but it's not as though Rocky Point isn't ample with parking. And, there are many documented photos. I know the Courtney Campbell Scenic Highway Committee does a really great job of documenting it. They have tons of photos of illegal parking. Like folks, especially Jeeps, they'll just park on mangroves, they'll park on rocks, and they'll do that because no one is out there to enforce it. And it's not necessarily a problem of there is no enforcement, it's there's so much enforcement. And more importantly, it is a safety issue. I mean, a lot of folks are out there. I know we've had instances where folks have shared a lot of open carry out there where people are afraid to enforce, and TPD already has a big enough turf to cover that it's hard for them to get out to that part of the city of Tampa. So it's a difficult spot for enforcement in general. So it just kind of, again, turned into a no man's land where anything kind of goes.
I can just give my own. I lived at Post Rocky Point a year and a half ago, for a year and a half, while my house was being built. And we didn't leave, and that's behind the hotels and everything. We could hear the noise and the cars racing 2 o'clock in the morning because the drag race on Courtney Campbell. I mean, it's just outrageous. But the amount of trash and debris that was floating in the water, like into Rocky Point and stuff, it's not good. And we wouldn't leave the apartment like 9:30 at night on the weekends because there were crashes right there at Rocky Point and the Causeway constantly. People were getting run over, like they were even being stained. It was just, we wouldn't leave. We didn't let our kids out there or anything. It was dangerous. It was very dangerous and loud. I can't even tell you.
I don't have any Rocky Point contributions, but was it part of your scope to look at things you can do in the water to help attenuate some of the wave action, like mangroves is the only thing I could think of, but I'm sorry if I missed that.
Yes, that's some of the options. So mangroves within the shorelines, offshore breakwaters is another option that waves break offshore instead of not on the shoreline. So those are all options that we're evaluating.
I mean, I understand the more need for concrete and steel and that sort of thing, but just whatever you can do to kind of adopt Mother Nature strategies.
And that's part of the study is figuring out where are we most vulnerable? So at the southern end of the Skyway on the Manatee side, you'll see those big concrete structures. They look like giant concrete pyramids with holes in them. And those are breakwaters and they're put out 100, 200 feet away from the bridge, but that's to take on the wave energy. So by the time it gets to the bridge, you don't have such strong forces. Once you get up to the Courtney Campbell, we don't really see wave energy like that because it's so far up, but we have more of Courtney Campbell as a water level rise. Because now you're on the highest part of Tampa Bay, where does that water go? Right, so until it recedes back, the water level is just getting higher and higher. And that's what we're noticing at Courtney Campbell. It's more of the water levels and the water velocity, not so much of the wave heights. At least that's what we're seeing, but Atkins study will tell us more about it. And that's why he mentioned not every bridge, not every area is going to have the same protective measure installed. That's why we need to see what are we getting the best bang at per buck. The living shorelines are great additive. We've looked at those as well, installing mangroves, right? Because those take on a lot of the wave energy and help with quality. The problem with mangroves, you'll notice that where they currently exist is where they're happy, right? So they need to have more shallow waters to be able to be installed. And I've talked to other environmentalists and they say, well, maybe if you build basically like a dam around them and let them get their roots out and then you can have more water and let them build up. So there's different things we can do in different areas. I know we were looking at installing more mangroves maybe on the Gandy Bridge over on the Pinella side. So, but it really is, it's a huge elephant that we're trying to take bite-sized pieces. What I'm noticing the most about Courtney Campbell is the slopes, where you're talking about the beaches. And if anyone drives out there anytime this week, you'll see that the slopes along the roadway, not before you even get to the bridge, that's what's starting to erode. So that's where we're looking at, okay, well, how do we strengthen the slopes so they just don't wash out when we get these high water levels? And right now they're going out there and they're filling it just as an emergency repair, but we will have to go back and keep strengthening these to make sure we don't lose part of our roadway. You can see the erosion and at some locations even approaches the posts of the guardrail, right? That's along the roadway. We don't want it anywhere near that high. So it's just, this bridge is the causeway is very low level compared to the amount of water it's seeing. So we're really trying to get ahead of studying it and install where we can.
And each of those options, like I showed a matrix, I mean, there's advantages and disadvantages that we're trying to understand holistically what those advantages and disadvantages look like, not just on an engineering perspective, like the offshore breakwaters, that just as an example, they can probably do well at preventing erosion. The disadvantage isn't an engineering concern, but just, just a, safety concern is along Courtney Campbell, like there's jet skis ripping up and down, all the time. So if you put a structure that, is out there in the water, it potentially becomes a boating hazard.
That's what I was wondering, are you guys actually exploring? It's got to be on the table.
Yeah.
Whether or not the beach goes away or gets reduced, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
that's going to be the road that you're going to.
Yeah, so essentially the water levels are rising and then we install these giant concrete structures 100 feet away from the bridge. How do boaters and jet skis know that those structures are there? So then you also have that safety concern as well. But I know there are talks about the beaches that is a level higher than me, but I know there's a lot of talks with leadership as far as, do we keep maintaining these beaches, working with the locals? I know that would be a big impact to the public, okay? And there would be a lot of outcry if we get rid of those, but at the same time, it comes in, we're constantly rebuilding. A lot of the agencies are spending a lot of money, so that is a upper level leadership decision.
20 minutes away.
So true. Arizona?
Yeah. No idea on the back, later. I want to get your, what the water you go out here and but no. I wonder that they have the people that they do it, you want with the yellow, but maybe they can go out there and help with the between the people we have, the yes. Oh, you think that?
Yes, that's funded by CRA dollars though, and we do not have a CRA in that area.
It's nothing but they have that.
Yeah, Kevin?
The only thing I'll just say, just to put this out there, is I know when we had our parking master plan presentation, I know they're in phase one, but one of the topics they're discussing is parking management districts, where the funds collected from parking stay within that district. One of the ideas that came up internally was, the Courtney Campbell and Benty Davis is a perfect attempt at a capstone, or not capstone, but just kind of a snapshot of how you would apply that to the entire city by using that district. It's a very unique parking environment. It's mostly recreation driven and mostly kind of swells on the weekends. So having, even just a minor increase in parking rate will hopefully make the city salt on the lot. More importantly, just matching what Clearwater is paying will hopefully have a pot of money that the city can apply towards other things regarding restoration as well as beach management. Because to your point, there will be uproar if the beach does go away. Of course, that nature may make that decision for us. Time will tell. But our ability to, properly fund this community asset so that now it can be preserved or at least maintained on a basis where we're not having to have these resiliency studies and have this question answered for us when we know we have a dedicated source of revenue that goes toward it. So that might be something that maybe the city of Tampa with parking and mobility and Parks and Rec can collaborate on, as well as with TPD. And of course, the Alliance is ready and really help that. The Courtney Campbell Causeway is also a great group of advocates. So just throwing it out there, maybe that's the way that we can finally try this idea at Tampa, have those funds stay within the Courtney Campbell and use that to preserve the beach. And I think you'll find a lot of positive reception to that.
People really want that parking money to go toward road improvement, just saying.
Towards what?
Road improvement.
Okay. Okay, I'm clarifying. So you're saying the small bridge, which we've seen previous presentations, that's helping clean, that is causing, some, like it's, sound like it fails faster because of that small bridge.
I don't want to say failure.
Or,
That's a strong word. No, definitely not failure. So that cut through bridge, the Courtney Campbell Causeway was already in place. And then you realize that there was a water quality issue because it stops the water from flowing into Tampa Bay in that eastern corner. So they weren't able to change the profile of the roadway in such a short time. So instead they just did a cut through bridge, basically cut it out and put a low level bridge. And because of that, now you have, where most of our bridges are pretty high up, now we have a bridge that's constantly being inundated by water and those high water levels and the impacts. So we checked the seawalls, everything's fine, but we do notice that we're having erosion at the bridge, which is why they're going out this week and dumping a bunch of concrete to stabilize those areas.
And then, so funding is always an issue. So are you guys using the sustainability and resiliency special funding to do these studies, or is this just right now the normal?
Right now we're using state funds.
Huh?
Right now we're using state funds for resiliency studies, but we will be pursuing, I plan to pursue grants, federal grants in the future. Right now for the causeways, we're actively working on the Courtney Campbell bridge structures, but once you start talking about the causeways, the approaches to it, that's where we're going to need to use the matrix and find out what is the most feasible option, what is the best results that we can get for that amount of money. And then we have a consultant on board through district headquarters that they work on grant writing. So we plan on using that as well to start pursuing federal grants for some of these smaller projects.
That's good to hear. The TO did a resiliency study, and we were hoping that would lead to some resiliency funding to add to our already. Okay, and then since I heard that water level is the issue, water level, is climate and sustainability at a bigger level. I know it's above your scope of this project. I'm really great at the department, and we all worked on alternative modes and got more people in transit and everything so that we could prevent the thing, because I'm sure that this project has got no small price tag, and this would be great if we could prioritize sustainability in other areas.
And I know the department's actively looking at that for the Howard Franklin corridor, future mobilities. I have not heard those talks for the Courtney Campbell Causeway as of yet. But I'm sure as more information and as we study further, we'll be looking at those avenues as well.
Yeah, because it kind of sounds like you guys are putting some pretty extensive Band-Aids on a bridge that's got a short lifespan, given how low it is and how high the water is going.
The main bridge itself, it's a 75-year lifespan to it. Once we strengthen the slopes of the bridge structure will be safe and secure. The areas that we are vulnerable are the roadway approaches to get to it. And that's the same thing that happened with Sanibel and a lot of the bridges that we saw back in the district in Fort Myers and the southern counties. It's not the bridges. The bridges are on piles that are embedded 100 feet deep. It's not the bridges, it's the roadways that we really have to figure out how to strengthen, whether it's MSC walls or just slopes going out to the roadways.
And do you recall the budget to do those fixes that you went out and you hardened the slopes thus far?
I can get you the exact cost for the Courtney Campbell Causeway project, but the emergency repairs that we're doing right now at the smaller Virginia Crichton Bridge is, we estimated about $800,000 for us to strengthen the smaller bridge. But I can, if you're interested, I can get you the cost for what was just awarded for the main Courtney Campbell.
And then the add-ons that you had to go back and add to the original design of the Howard Franklin Bridge, do you recall what that add-on to the scope?
I can get you a cost.
Curious how much was spent.
Yeah, I can definitely work on getting those costs.
It's very fascinating. Thank you. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Do we need to?
This is status of Roberta's commenting.
Okay.
What, it's a resilience day.
Good morning, everyone. Connor McDonald, TPO staff. It is on your agenda that I'll be presenting, but I think Pedro is online actually.
Oh, yeah, he is.
So I'll just introduce Pedro, Dr. Serios real quick, and then have him take over. So this needs assessment establishes the current and future needs of the transportation system, focusing on pavement, bridge, and transit assets, while considering the resilience of these assets against potential challenges. Here to present is Dr. Pedro Serios with Cambridge Systematics. He's an infrastructure management specialist using his expertise in statistical analysis and modeling asset performance and traffic data to support transportation asset management and system performance improvement. With that, I'll leave it to Dr. Serios. The screen is not sharing.
Okay. I made you presenter, but I'm not sure if it.
Oh, I can present from here.
Oh, okay.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry. I mean, make the room the presenter again.
That would be great, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect, thanks. You're gonna pull back the slides, right?
Next to share my screen. Can you touch it?
I don't see it on this screen.
All right, hold on. I'm on it.
Oh, here we go.
There's two plan health roles. Oh, yeah, there we go.
Perfect. Thanks. All right, so today I'll be presenting the work and results from the development of the 2050 Long Range Transportation Planning Needs Assessment for the state of good repair and resilience. So for today's presentation, I'll start with a brief overview of the objectives of this project, discuss the data and assumptions used for the needs assessment analysis, then go over the results from this analysis by asset type, starting with payment and bridges, transit assets, and then resilience needs. Then I'll discuss the main conclusions from this project, and at the end I'll open for any questions you may have. Next. All right, so the objectives of this project was to perform a state of good repair and resilience analysis as part of the 2050 LRTP update. This includes the analysis of current and future needs to achieve state of good repair of pavement, bridges, and transit assets, and the assessment of investment needs to increase the resiliency of the assets to natural disaster and extreme weather in the region. Next. So for the needs assessment analysis, the first step consisting of gathering the necessary data. So for this, we requested data on pavement, bridges, and transit assets to each agency stakeholders. These data requests include condition, maintenance, cost, and budget information. So whenever data was not available, we fill the gaps using assumptions informed by some documents we were able to find, such as the FDOT and HART transportation asset management plans, and inventory data from the bridges in the regions from the Federal Highway InfoBridge website. So after gathering this data, we had one-to-one meetings with each agency to validate our assumptions and to review the data we were using for the data. Next. All right, so in the next few slides, I'll be presenting the results from the needs assessment. For each needs assessment by asset type, we consider two spending levels. The first one was the trend spending level, and then the performance spending level. For the trend spending level, we estimated the impact to the condition of the infrastructure if the existing spending level continued all the way to 2050. Whereas for the performance spending level, we estimated what's the additional funding to reach state of good repair. So for the payment assets, the current funding spent for pavement preservation is 136.2 million. This funding level results in about 28% of the roads achieving the goal to be resurfaced every 12 to 20 years, depending on the target or goal of each of the agencies in the region. And that we also found that the funding shortfall varies significantly across the stakeholders. So the additional funding to close the gap was 86.9 million per year. This will result in all of the roads resurfaced within the target resurfacing cycle for each of the agencies. And on average, a typical road would be resurfaced once every 18 years. Next, please. All right, for bridges, we found that the current total funding for bridge preservation in the region is 19 million per year. And this funding level results in about 72% of the bridges achieving goal of being rehabilitated in around 4 years. So this funding shortfall varies significantly across the stakeholders. Again, FDOT being not having this issue, whereas other like the Hillsborough County having a much larger gap. For the performance spending level, we estimated that an additional 7.4 million per year are needed to achieve the goal of having these bridges resurfaced every under preservation cycle. Next one. All right, so for the transit asset analysis, we consider the two most expensive maintaining assets, which are the buses and the buildings. Something that should be noted here for the bus fleet assessment is that HART has been operating at a scaled back service. So for instance, the bus fleet is 32% smaller compared to the 2019 needs assessment. So for buses, the current spending level is 12 million annually for bus replacement. And what we found is that this funding level is sufficient to keep the bus fleet of the current bus fleet of 132 buses to an age less than 10 years, which is the benchmark recommended by the Federal Transit Administration. We also found that some buildings, such as administration and the heavy maintenance buildings, that are overdue for replacement. For the performance spending level, again, like the main conclusion was that the trend fleet spending level must be sustained to meet FDA recommended benchmarks, and there are over 105 million of backlogs in transit building maintenance. Next one, please. Right, next we perform a needs assessment for resilience investments. So for this, we focus on two resilience improvement categories, which is the stormwater resilience improvements and the road resilience improvements, including hardening pavement and sub-base raising profile of roads and shoreline preservation. So the data that was used for this was data coming from Tampa Bay Resilient Tampa Bay study conducted in 2020. As part of that study, there were 71 miles that were identified as critical for mobility in the region, and that they are moderately to highly vulnerable to extreme weather in the region. So for the term spending fund, the current budget allocated to stormwater improvements, regardless whether they're resiliency or non-resiliency improvements, the total funding right now is 1.6 million per year. And for road maintenance is 82.3 million per year, again, regardless of whether they are resulting in resiliency. So then we estimated the funding needed to treat these 71 miles of critical roads that are moderately to highly vulnerable, and the funding for treating them for stormwater resilience improvement is an additional 14.8 million per year, which is much greater than the entire budget allocated currently for stormwater improvements. And for road resilience improvement was 67.4 million per year, which is a significant portion of the entire budget. Next one. All right, this slide I'm showing you the conclusion from the project. So for pavement and bridges, the conclusion is that the overall current spending level are insufficient to maintain the pavement and bridges in the Hillsborough region at the Tucker preservation level, and an additional 94 million per year are needed to achieve. In terms of transit assets, there are over 105 million in backlogs in transit building maintenance, including the Hart's Heavy Maintenance Facility, which is critical for the operation of the agency, which is already past the end of its useful life and in marginal condition currently. We also found that the current spending is sufficient to maintain the current bus fleet at the recommended service life by the FDA. And again, it should be noted that HAR has been operating scale back service compared to 2019, with a bus fleet that's smaller by 32%, and additional analysis will be needed if the agency decides to increase back the bus fleet size. In terms of resilience investment needs, we found that the current spending on stormwater improvements only accounts for 11% of the funding needed to improve the critical roads that are moderate to highly vulnerable, and that also the funding needed to harden or to protect the critical roads that are moderate to highly vulnerable is about 82% of the entire current road maintenance budget. All right, next one. That was the last slide of my presentation today, where Connor or I will be happy to address any question you have.
Thank you, Dr. Serio. So we'll take any questions or comments that we have.
I have a question. When you're looking at the pavement, repaving basically, that's on all roads, whether it's a local subdivision road, a major arterial?
In terms of like the cost, is it like varied out between the type of roadway? I'm not sure, Dr. Serios, do you know whether the cost is different for different categories of roadways, whether it's local or if it's generic based on the roadway miles?
Yeah, so for the network maintained by FDOT, we had disaggregated cost estimates. Now, for the smaller agencies, we had like an overall value, which because to reflect that, reflecting that they are not that valuable. But yes, we really use disaggregated values for the FDOT network.
So, in the amount of years to repave a road, local roads are included. Is that what?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I know they've had to do this in more rural states. They've had to basically retreat. So if we're repaving local roads in the rural area, I mean, that, to me, is an area where if the county can't, under the budget, maintain roads, I mean, there may be some local roads in the rural area that need to revert back to dirt or some sort of non-pavement.
Like prioritize the urban roads.
The urban, right, because if I mean, ideally, we would all love more money to handle all these situations, but I would think there has to be some acknowledgement that, okay, if you're in the rural area, you expect to see a more rural pattern, and that is a rural pattern, is a local road potentially just morphing back to a dirt road and not.
As opposed to urban versus rural, I would say it's the higher volume, higher traffic. You know,
Right,
where the
like
higher
in the-
traffic areas.
Right, in the rural
It
areas.
is urban, but
Right, in the.
contributed to more traffic.
Right, and of course,
Higher use.
if there's arterials or something, major roadways in the rural area, those of course have to be repaid, but we have to retreat. I would think that would be somewhere where the county could say, that's not an expectation. If you're on a little local road out in the rural area.
With 800
Point of
trips a
clarification,
year.
Big Boss in the back,
Especially if
is
it's
that
dead.
this was the TPO network, which just goes down to the level of collectors in our
I
territory.
didn't think it was those. Yeah.
But
So
some
there's-
county roads are in there that are also in the rural areas. So
Because remember,
the point
the
is
city,
still,
the city repavement schedule is like 75 years.
Right.
It's not 12 to 20.
that's recommended, 75 is what's occurring.
Yeah.
Anyone?
Eric, it might be just off topic, but I've been reading about a lot of recycled content that can be used in roads now, and I wondered if any of those costs, you know, were all considered or could be considered.
Again, I'm not sure, you know, what types of pavement or different materials could be used. Dr. Serios, do you know if there's a discrepancy in what could be used in our analysis?
Well, so the estimates we used for this analysis were, were not at the project level. We did not consider different treatment types at that, it's more like a high level analysis where we consider the typical, target resurfacing cycle for each agency. We consider the resurfacing cost per lane mile. Every agency gave us that information, and some cases it's aggregated by road type, but the treatment type was not a factor. We use overall values for kind of, the typical treatments that each agency uses.
So if you can hear, like, we just use high level planning level because we're going for 2050. We even do high level estimates of increases in costs and services. So if on the detail, when it comes to building the road, they have better practices, great, so be it and stuff. But I know I was just going to have the statement of, like, we had the combination of Courtney Campbell here, resiliency, and then we got the bleak. I get depressed every time I see one of these tech demo presentations about how much the needs are versus our trends, and no easy answer to resolve that. We're only spending a little teeny bit, but we need like quadruple or twice that for many of those services. So to see many of the projects that were presented today implemented, it's a quandary. I get paid big bucks. It's not easy.
Anyone else? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
But I brought it back as it's still an unresolved whole business. But member Kevin O'Hare had prepared and requested the response at our past meeting. And it was the October meeting when DOT was here to present the work program. So I'll let Kevin take it away from there.
Was it in the agenda packets or?
I emailed it to everybody separately yesterday, and I
Take a stack.
have printed
Pass one
copies.
there and another stack that way,
Do you
but-
want to do the introduction?
Yeah, I can just follow up on it. So back in October, right? with the
October.
meeting? So at the October meeting, we had a presentation on the fiscal year 25 through 29 5-year work plan from FDOT. So I think it was me and David Hay who made the motion to ask for comparison of the 5-year work plans across all D7. For all the districts within the state of Florida. So I think the response we got from the department was those numbers were not available. So I thought that was, I just wanted to kind of double check. So I found that they have the 24 through 28 numbers for all districts on the website. And Lisa, you have the link, I think, for the folks online and just for everyone's kind of due diligence to have it. But what I did was I remember Karen, I believe some of your comments were also on breaking it down by a pie chart. So it's not a pie chart, but I did break it down by percentage. So what you have in front of you is something that I made. I didn't want to share it until we confirmed with the department that those numbers from 24 to 28 are indeed accurate, which we did confirm that those numbers on the website were accurate. So these are the numbers from the website. The top chart is broken down by a percentage of the total amounts given to each district. And then the bottom chart is going to give the raw totals broken down by millions. And then those categories are the same categories that the district, well, that FDOT uses to kind of break down funding for each one. I know the department could speak more as to what goes in what bucket, but I think the important context here is that first, this is just to kind of close the loop on the motion that was made in October. I had a feeling that these numbers were readily available. This is the 24 through 28 fiscal 5-year work plan, so just keep in mind that they're currently updating it. So there will be some changes, and I'm sure when those changes are made, you will be able to find all the district's work plans from 1 through 7, those 5-year work plans on the website. So we'll have new numbers obviously in a couple months, but I thought it would be important to have this, given the spirit of our conversation back in October, for comparison of what each district is spending in terms of dollars on a couple of priorities that I think some of our members were interested in. So again, what you have in front of you is from the website. I want to make sure that we're showing our work and hopefully is helpful to understand. The last thing I'll say is I think there's important context with each district is not the same. Some districts are more rural, some districts are more urban, some districts have larger assets, some districts have not as many assets. So, there are some things to keep in mind. Also, I know some things that you can go through each work plan. It's very itemized and very detailed. Kudos to the department for being very detailed in that. But there are some categories where they don't necessarily represent the project that you might think it represents. So for example, rail sometimes doesn't mean rail projects as in light rail or streetcar. It might mean freight, and that falls in the transit category. So just kind of some important context to note. I think that's important for understanding these. But again, for discussion purposes, hopefully can close the loop on our conversation.
Can you remind us
I actually don't have one.
SHS means?
State highway system.
Okay, state highway system. And then if you could just kind of briefly tell us, like, District 7 is sort of Tampa Bay. What about, where is District 1? Like, what are those basic areas for those of us who don't know?
So I don't have a map in front of me, so I'm going to probably not.
It sounds like some people have their
Yeah,
hands up, they can answer.
Yeah.
So District 7 is Hillsborough, Pinellas, Pasco, Hernando, Citrus.
Mhm.
District 1 is Manatee, Sarasota, Polk County, Hernando, or not Hernando, Hendry, Charlotte County, Lee County, Okeechobee County. So you have 12 counties in District 1 and 5 counties in District 7.
What about, like, so basically District 1 is sort of south of Tampa Bay.
Correct.
What about District 2? South of that Bartow?
District 2 is north of District 7.
Okay.
Bartow's District 1. That's what I asked. I wrote down, she said Miami was Bartow.
No, Miami's District.
Miami's District 6.
So Miami is District 6. Then, so north is Tampa Bay.
Like this around us.
District 1.
Naples and all that is 4.
Yeah, District 1 is, you think Manatee County, south of Hillsborough, all the way down to Alligator Alley, which is Lee County, and then all the way the middle part of the state.
Yeah.
Because then along the east coast is District 4 and District 6. We can show them that.
So East Coast, so District 4 is just north of Miami.
Correct. That's like
And
Fort Lauderdale.
District 3 is like Orlando.
No, District 3 is the Panhandle.
Oh, District 3 is.
Yeah, it's rural, it's Chipley. And 5 is like Orlando.
Yeah, I think
5 is Orlando.
the big comparisons would be, I think, District 5, District 6, District 4, and 7, because those will have kind of the major metropolitan areas within the state.
Yeah, that's
that might
basically
be
what I was looking for.
That might be a Jacksonville snub, so I apologize to any Jaguars fans. But
And then the red and green means what?
So yes, that's an important note. So I conditionally formatted the top part, so just to kind of give some disparity. So green, the more green that the chart looks, or that cell looks, is the highest spending percentage within that district, and then the more red is the lowest spending percentage, and then you can see the raw total at the bottom there, because again, like even though District 4 is spending, 2.4 billion on the SHS, it doesn't necessarily make it comparable to say District 7 where it's 1.9 billion. Those are two total dollars, but you can see the percentage broken down. And then there's an average at the very end, so you can see like on average what is across all districts, what is the on average the district spending on. I get Kevin.
This is great, Kevin. Thank you.
Yeah, this is really awesome. Thank you so much.
And scary.
Yeah.
Well, I think I remember our conversation, a lot of this was kind of more comparable to figure out, and it's not apples to apples even within the categories, because again, a rail project is not going to be funded. A rail project is mostly freight, and of course, this also doesn't cover federal funds. So if there's some sort of federal match or a federal project that's getting a large contribution, that's another piece of the puzzle. But from a district perspective, this is how the district measures their budgets across all 7, and this is how the district measures who gets what. And of course, there's also some given, like for example, District 7, we have the Western Interchange Project and we have the Howard Franklin Bridge. We have obviously more funding in the state highway system than say Miami, where they only have the 395 interchange. So, depending on what big projects we have in the hopper, it does affect the percentages as well. And I think that's important context. It doesn't mean that they're funding transit less. It just means we have a really big asset that's getting a really big uptake.
Are you our FDOT liaison today? Okay, would you introduce yourself and say what you
I'm Suzanne Monk. I'm your liaison for Hillsborough County. Or
I didn't catch your
Hillsborough.
name, what?
Suzanne Monk.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
The
I'm the one that gave the work
recognized
program presentation. So just to clarify, I don't think that we said that the numbers were not available. The problem with this kind of information is the numbers in front of you were adopted in July of 23. Our projects in the work program are updated. It's a living, breathing document. So technically those numbers captured in July, but those project costs could have gone up. We could have received funding from another source. There could be something else that wasn't captured in those numbers. So it makes it a little bit hard. And then what I presented in October is the tentative work program, and it contained the tentative, which is not adopted until July. So technically the adopted is correct because that's the last adopted one. So it gets a little finicky and a little bit hard to understand. And I think part of it is going and pulling the information from the tentative work programs from the other districts, because we don't speak for them. It just gets a little bit hairy on that. So that's really what it's about. And I didn't have a chance to get through your chart. I did see it, and I did see your email yesterday, and I appreciate you doing that. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay. Well, now you know that, I mean, Nicole's this level of detail.
I understand.
Next work program tentative.
And I understand, and I think Brian had talked to you about that previously.
Well, you did right after the request, and you said it was not available, but it'd be very difficult to pull those numbers together. So then Kevin pulled the numbers together in a not so difficult, in his opinion, way. So,
but technically they're not accurate numbers.
Well, technically, so yeah, so.
There are point in time.
At a point in time, yes.
In fairness, I think it's important, yes, what was presented in October was what the next plan is going to be. And, I first went and looked at what the tentative presentations would be for the other 7 districts.
Yeah.
So I figured, you can't compare the tentative to what's fixed for everyone else. So for the purpose of what this was and what was prepared, again, is solely for discussion purposes. I don't think we really clarified in our motion, because I went back and looked at the minutes, whether we wanted the fiscal year 24 through 28, or if we wanted the tentative, just for a comparison of all 7. So in that motion, it was really just a comparison of all 7. not so much a comparison of the tentative, because again, like those documents change, and obviously, again, even this document changes because there are different flows of funding. Obviously, costs have gone up, so I'm sure that there are probably some higher dollars in this than when it was probably approved in 2023. But again, I think just kind of where our conversation was going, a snapshot point in time, because we know budgets evolve and change, and especially the 5-year work plan is very much an ever-changing document because every year it's always changing. Just kind of gives us an idea, because in many cases, and Suzanne, I guess this would be my only question, do these types of 5-year work plans, do they swing dramatically? Like, are you going to see a world where District 1's 26% of their spending on SHS swings to like 5% in the year? I would imagine no, but.
I would imagine no, but I mean,
it can change.
I can't speak to that because I don't look at D1's numbers.
But
So
it could go to 40 if a project like.
right, if we were to get awarded a federal grant that, a raise grant, and the raise grant has a pass through and it gets approved and put into the work program, it could swing one of those numbers up. But I can only speak for D7.
Of course.
Emily?
I think that's why we need this kind of thing. We need a snapshot in time so we can see the impact of huge influxes of federal money or areas where there isn't that kind of money. I think this is a reasonable request to have this kind of comparison, because while I know you are working with District 7, we are all paying taxes across all of Florida, and it is appropriate for us to be able to see the level of spending across the state to have some sort of understanding of how we are apportioning our budgets by district. Yes, each one is only going to be a snapshot in time, but that's true of any budget. And it's okay for FDOT to bring us a budget and say, this is what we have, this is what they have, this is what the other has. And so we can see where we are as we make our recommendations and as we have look to our elected officials to make changes to those numbers in the future.
Okay, yeah, and I'm happy to pass that along back to the district.
I'm sorry, Nicole. Oh, yeah. My comment was more a general comment. I actually really like being able to look at this. I agree with what you're saying, Emily, just being able to see what our spending looks like by district. But I also would be curious to see this compared to locally or regionally. Like, are some of the, I think about transit, for example, it's really low funding priority, or there's lower budget, or it's a lower percentage of the budget for actually all of the districts. But is that being made up for in the county budget? Is that being made up for on the larger regional look? Like, where is some of the spending coming from? I wish that were true on the county level, but being able to see that, like, oh, actually this is being made up for in other areas, or there's funding priorities for these projects in these other budgets. So just being able to look at spending across from the state, from the county, from the city, like, I like just being able to see this in this snapshot. So thank you for bringing this to the group, Kevin, and
those that are interested in that level of detail, our cost feasible tech memo that we saw a month or so ago, dives within it, shows county has this much, DOT has this much, Hart has this much, so you can get lost in the numbers on our line.
I do appreciate you putting this together. For me, the comparison across the board like this, for me, it just needs more context, which I know is hard for you to do, because this is apples and oranges and bananas and coconuts, because the districts are so different. So even just and it would be our work to probably do too, but even that comparison of in the state highway system, how many interchanges, how many segments that are in one district versus the other, because I would only want to compare us to the ones that actually have similar assets, similar issues. There's no sense in us going up against the 12 districts in District 1 that is Avon Park and, just totally different.
I think
totally
it's
different.
Getting that information, that level of detail. Like, I've had numerous conversations with Vashaka about trying to figure out how we could capture trail projects or any biped improvements that are included in some of the resurfacing projects and things like that. Being able to pull that number out, and I always at the end of those presentations try to make sure that you understand those are standalone projects. That's what we can tell you, and then there's resurfacing projects that have those as well. It's hard to pull that information out of our system. So, I mean, it's something I can go back to the district and ask work program if that's something that we can look at.
So like the 48% and the SHS, some of that's resurfacing.
I would assume.
But yeah,
It's
definitely,
hard to, I mean,
And we have a
yeah.
pretty solid amount of state highway system within our district.
Yes.
That's even to local use, I mean, almost.
Yes.
The number that worries me the most, to be honest, out of all of these would be the safety. That's the one that
And I think that
worries me the most.
that one as well, because like the resurfacing projects, when we go to do resurfacing projects, we do a road safety audit. We go out there, we assess, we are looking to see, you know, does it need pedestrian features? Does it need safety features? What can we add? What money do we have? We have the scoping meetings now. I think Gina sends it out to the staff at the TPO. So like if there's concerns about projects that are coming up and we're going to be resurfacing a project, we're looking to Gina or, you know, TPO staff to give us those comments like, hey, we really need a mid-block crossing here, or, you know, there's an issue here. And I know Ben has reached out to us through the BPAC about some concerns. And so he was able to give us some comments and we were able to incorporate them into our scope development meeting. So we can figure out what we need to scope and if we have the funding to go in and do those extras on top of the resurfacing. So we're trying to incorporate that. It's just really in listening to everybody.
Karen, was it you that had your hand up?
I did. I noticed that Orlando's percentage of safety spending is, you know, even at times almost double what the other districts are. And I wondered if it might be worth understanding either they're categorizing it differently or they're doing something politically maybe that can allow a bigger spend. So I'm just curious if anyone knows, has any insight into what Orlando is doing well.
I don't have insight. I was just going to actually double ask that is, that was the first thing that stood out to me was the, you know, Orlando is probably one of our more closer comparisons. And, you know, they're spending, at least in the last 24-28 work plan, $150 million on safety projects, and District 7 spending $71 million. So I think that's a pretty good comparison. So I am curious to know, maybe that is a, you know, some of these projects are under the state highway system and they're categorized as that. It doesn't mean the projects don't exist. I think it's just more a matter of, you know, where those projects are. And again, maybe they are missing, and if they are, then what does Orlando have, or what are they doing in District 5 that we can learn from or improve from? The other disparity I would say is, especially with District 4, which is Fort Lauderdale, Broward County, they have the highest percentage of transit dollars that are spent within District 4. And I think, Nicole, to your point earlier, you know, Broward County has and Palm Beach County both have local sales tax options for transportation. So I imagine that the reason why they have the highest percentage in the state is because they're able to match, and the department is more of a partner in funding those than rather funding entire projects. So I assume that also attracts those dollars. Again, I'm making an assumption. We'll have to ask someone from District 4 to come and answer that question. But I think it's a good point in, you know, why is it that District 4 is getting almost, you know, triple of what other districts are getting? Obviously, District 6 has Tri-Rail. They have a lot of assets, Miami-Dade, so they're going to get a lot of subsidy from the state. But District 4 was a little bit more comparable to me than District 6, given that that's very dense. So, so yeah, those are two observations that I'd be.
Emily?
I think the safety thing is worth noting. I know that this safety can be looped in all sorts of other projects, but I believe that was the reason for the original conversation of we as a committee have very much emphasized, let's start by looking at safety. Everything should have a safety lens and not like, oh yeah, and then we'll also do some safety. So we want to see more projects that start with that mindset and safety for all users, not just for drivers. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I can add, I have the privilege of sitting on the state safety coalition with a focus on bike ped. And so I do get to like kind of compare and see other areas of the state are doing. So given that resource, and we're meeting January 30th, 31st, but I see if I can't get to some of those comparison, you know, how's District 5 doing so much, you know, so, and maybe have a guest speaker at a future meeting then, since it sounds like the committee's very intrigued with this. Okay, so I will do that, and then I will, yes, kudos. Beth and her wisdom, like keeps digging into trying to like get the will of the communities reflected in DOT's work projects, and they keep partnering with them in ways to make that happen. So we added another duty for the staff this year, and Gina's the prime, but I comment and then comments, we collectively send comments over on scope. So it's like before they even tell the consultant to go out and design the roadway, we're like, consider this, consider this, consider that. And so Livable roadway commit comments and meeting minutes, I cut and paste and include in that, and community plans and overlays and everything that we've ever looked at. So we're very appreciative of the department's assistance on that. Yes, I do get that you guys hold safety and bike ped into many, many projects, but I assert probably these other departments do, districts do. So we would like to see our, since the commitment is vision zero, everything from this committee's perspective, they want to see the detail. And they have seen more detail in the past. So they're just, wanting to keep the detail in your presentation.
Back to the scoping. So we are providing any projects that we're scoping that are in Hillsborough County, we're providing those to the TPO staff, and then so they know when the upcoming dates are, and we're able to submit, ask you guys if you have any questions, or go back and look and see. I know Ben had some insight on a project from a couple BPAC meetings ago, and he was able to input those. So we are trying to partner on that and get your outlooks on the scoping so that we can add things as it comes in. The asphalt is expensive, so we haven't been able to do as much, but we're hoping that in the next cycle with these resurfacing projects, we'll be able to do that as well. And I know Peter's actively always hitting the ground running with something new in safety, so.
That's been a while since we had a safety presentation, so maybe he does.
I'm sure he could send Emmett.
Huh.
He'll probably send Emmett Duran.
Right.
Yeah.
He'll probably say Emmett, but like, I see them at that coalition, but this committee hasn't seen one in a little while or board, so it may be something for us to coordinate on.
Yeah.
So that you
If
guys
that's something
can
you
know
would like to
all
see.
what they are doing.
Okay.
Larry?
Yeah, we have a person that handles safety and mobility in the technical services division for the county, and that's Abigail Forrest. So if you're going to coordinate with TPO, I would like to see that you coordinate with her. And just, I don't know if this is, I apologize, I came in late. I had been called to do a special thing. So I just wanted to say that TSD has secured $30 million in grants for safety and mobility this coming year. So just say that Abigail was actually one of the key to securing those grants. So if you would communicate with her on any of these projects and see if she has input, because she's doing a lot of localized safety and mobility projects.
We can reach out and see. We have we have some from the city. If it's in the city limits, we have someone from the city that receives the I guess the awareness of the scoping coming up, and we have somebody from the county, but I don't know who it is off the top of my head, but I can definitely look and also maybe add her to the incoming email so that we could work together. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion, just to kind of put a pin in the conversation for now. Is maybe to have the department at a time convenient to them. I don't think there's a time limit on it, but just to come back and talk a little bit more about the safety spending in District 7. I think that there are safety projects that are being done that maybe might not be reflected in what the work plan is, and maybe they're reflected in the next work plan in 25, 29. So I think it would be nice to have the department come and just talk a little bit more about it, because I know that there's a lot of sequencing and section building within each road. At least we've seen it in West Shore, where the department's repaving sidewalks and they're emphasizing crosswalks. So those things should count towards some form of safety recognition. And if there's not, then we can talk about that bridge when we get there, pun intended. So I'd like to make a motion to invite the department to come back at a time convenient to them to just talk a little bit more on their safety categories, I guess just for Hillsborough County, since it's only relevant to our scope.
Okay, so I have a motion by Kevin and a second by Arizona. Any conversation? Okay, all in favor?
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
And we've got a couple of online comments. Jason, do you want to unmute yourself and list them? Say them yourself?
Yeah, hi, everyone. Just included the FDOT, Florida Pedestrian and Bicycle Focus Initiative, their priority county map. So it's just a look at the districts and those priority counties that are listed as far as bike ped safety. So I guess if there, again, just as a side note, if there's any like look at, okay, where are they putting some emphasis on ped bike safety, it'll show you on this map. And it's at that link at the bottom of the page. And so, yeah, I thought that was, it kind of breaks out the districts as you all did it as well.
I pulled it up online to share. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Jen.
Okay, any other new business?
Yes.
I do. Okay. All right, you ready? There'll be officer elections in January, so if you're not interested, Kathy or anybody else in fulfilling your role, then I need to know so we can like make sure we recruit and vote. So let me know by email or something. And then congratulations. Thank you for serving again. Councilperson Hurtek was reelected at the December TPO meeting to serve for another year as our chair. Okay, so thank you for not being a wayward committee. Many of our others have challenges in their communications of RSVPs for the meetings. You guys all know your duty is to be here in person and then to communicate if not. And then I know if I have an issue and I start hounding you. But because of the other committees and to make everything uniform, all of the agendas in 2024 will have an RSVP button built into your agenda. You guys may not always get and open the agenda immediately, but if you would now in the future, do that and click that you're coming and communicate if you're not coming, etc. Of course, you can do it directly to me and Gail if something changes after you click the button or something. But anyway, so there's a new format. Also, we will be switching to Teams instead of GoToWebinar, and we're going to use the Teams public webinar option as our first attempt so that it'll function a lot like this. So we don't get bombed by bots and stuff. So bear with us as we transition to that. We've been testing it out, so hopefully there aren't any hiccups, but you're going to see, if you haven't already, it's going to show up differently on your calendars than it did. And you're not going to get this GoToWebinar link and blah, blah, blah. So, okay. What are you doing in 2024? You're RSVPing via the special button after you open the agenda, and I will remind you again, frequently and often. Okay. Officers RSVP. Okay, that's it. So then have a fabulous end of this year. Anyone else?
Well, I hope everyone has a wonderful end of the year. Happy holidays, happy new year. And we will see all of you here in January. All right.